Simcha, celebration, Simcha, Simcha, celebration of life.
Hello and welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. I'm your host, Aaron Halevi. In today's show, Rabbi Daniel Sackstein expounds on the role of Lithuanian yeshivot, Jewish learning institutions. We pay a visit to the Museum of Psalms in Israel and unpack the power of prayer with Rabbi Daniel Kohn. Continuing with his series, Lithuanian Legacy, Rabbi Daniel Sackstein elaborates on the development of yeshivot, or Jewish learning institutions in Lithuania. Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, a disciple of the Vilna Gaon, an influential 18th century Jewish spiritual leader, felt that the traditional arrangement of Jewish study did not cater for those who were looking for more intensive study. Revolutionizing organized Torah study, Rabbi Volozhin opened the Volozhin Yeshiva in 1803, which then became the mother of all Lithuanian-style yeshivas.
The South African Jewish community has its roots in Lithuania. The main immigration took place at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, where around about 40,000 Jews arrived in South Africa from Lithuania, and that was the basis of our community. It's important to understand where our ancestors were coming from and how life was in Lithuania. And one of the great aspects, one of the jewels in the crown of Lithuanian Jewry is the yeshiva movement. The yeshivot, a yeshiva, is a place of study of religious texts, of what we call the Torah. And yeshivot is really, as a result of the yeshivot, the Torah has been maintained and learnt in the 20th century. And the roots, the foundation of that movement, of the institution called the yeshiva, is Lithuania. In the year 1812, one of the great rabbis of Lithuania, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, came up with the concept, with the idea that the education system had to be changed, had to be modified. Up until that point, education was provided by a parent to a child, or as the setup was in Lithuania, you had the rabbis of the shtetls of the villages providing a cheder, a school for the children. Usually the children would remain, they would learn to read, they would learn to write, they would learn a basic understanding of the religious texts, and then they would move on into the workplace by the age of 14 or 15. Only the prodigies and the great minds that were identified by the rabbis in the chadarim, in those schools, would be kept on in learning. That was a select few. However, the landscape was changing. Rav Chaim of Volozhin realized that unless a specific institution was established for the learning of the Torah, so then perhaps the Torah would be forgotten. The reason why things were changing was that it was around the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and around about the year 1812, the devastation to the Jewish community, both in terms of numbers and in terms of infrastructure, was significant. Rabbi Chaim saw that the average town in Lithuania didn't even have a full set of the Talmud, of the oral tradition, which is really the heart and soul of the Torah. And therefore it would not be possible for their students, for the young people in those towns, to learn what they needed to learn from the Torah. And as a result of a lack of manpower too, there were not enough rabbis, there were not enough teachers. So Rabbi Chaim said, we need to centralize the system of education and set up an institution in which a very high level of Torah education will be provided, in which we will create the new generation of scholars, the new generation of Jewish leaders, which will ensure that the learning of our holy texts, of the Holy Torah, will remain alive and fresh and dynamic and will be passed on to the next generation. Rav Chaim successfully set up the mother of all yeshivot, called the Volozhin Yeshiva. The doors opened in 1812, and students, he wrote letters to all the rabbis of Lithuania, explaining what his concept was, asking them to send students to the yeshiva, and also asking them to provide financial assistance to the yeshiva. Now, there were no dormitories, and there were no dining rooms. There was just a study hall in which the students would learn, and students coming in from out of town, which was the majority of the student body, they had to stay in homes in the town of Volozhin. Volozhin was not a big place. There were between 90 and 100 Jewish families at the time. They would have to find a board and lodging with one of those families. They would pay them for accommodation. They would pay the family for meals that they would eat with the family, and they would go and study all day in the yeshiva. This idea, this innovation, was a smashing success, and it attracted the greatest minds of Lithuania. It was really the only place for a student with a powerful intellect to exercise and to develop that intellect. Remember, Jews in Eastern Europe were not allowed to attend universities, and so it attracted the best minds of the Jewish world in Eastern Europe. Rabbi Chaim Volozhin's goal was to build independent scholars who themselves would be able to teach and innovate in their own style, return back to their communities and keep the Torah fresh and alive, and ensure the next generation would be taught the beauty and the depth and the holiness of the Torah. The Volozhin Yeshiva remained open until the year 1892, when it was closed by the Russian government. But the foundation had been laid, and the cat was already out the bag, and the many generations that already had been 8 decades of wonderful students that had been educated in Volozhin, and those students went out and opened their own yeshivot, and they then gave birth to what's called the yeshiva movement.
Born in Transylvania in 1924, artist Moshe Tzvi Berger of blessed memory was an avid student of the esoteric secrets of Jewish mysticism and was able to interpret them in a visual medium. Through his unique color-saturated style, Moshe Tzvi has brought to life a visual collection of the 150 Psalms of King David, as well as the Sun series, 42 paintings that illustrate the Kabbalistic ideas of light, meditation, and healing through various permutations of the motif of the sun.
There is so much to say about Moshe Tzvi Berger, but I think we can say it very shortly, because he was a unique man. The landscape of his work, since I know him, I would say that is a melting of colors, of spirituality, technique. Even he always thought that the technique is not very important in his art. The technique is something that anybody can go and learn. But the point was what you do with the technique you learned. And depth. Yeah, depth, a lot of depth. I think that's what people see and feel when they look at his art. I can't explain another way the way people react, even they don't understand what they see. There is a lot of letters in his artwork. The first idea of a visitor is what verse did he write here? He didn't write any verse in his art. It's just a use of letters. And the reaction is behind the letters and behind what's all behind the work, you understand? I think it's about something, because he did it with all his soul, he could speak with the soul of the visitor or the person who were looking at his art. I think this from art to heart, if I can say. He started when he first did tshuva, came back to his faith, to Judaism, a series of 150 paintings based on the 150 Psalms of the King David, with the idea and the blessing, by the way, of the Rabbi of Lubavitch that he followed for all the 8 years. On the 8 years, he was used to go to him every summer, a few months, and the rabbi suggested him to paint the Psalms. So he did it without thinking that it will take him 15 years, without thinking that he will come in Israel, meet the Rabbi Getz, who was the rabbi of the holy city of Jerusalem, and he would open this place for him. And it took him 15 years for all the series. Right after the series of Psalms, he did a series of 42 paintings based on Ana Bekoach, very Kabbalistic paintings. Why 42? Because Ana Bekoach, every initials of the Ana Bekoach prayer, the sum of them is 42. It's like for each word of this prayer, he did one painting. And I met him, started to meet him right when he finished this series. He gave it the direction of meditation and healing. He was convinced that his work on Ana Bekoach had an influence of on the person who were looking at it and meditate on his art. After years I'm here working with his art, it seems that it works. That people are influenced and reacting so well to its art. With the effect of the colors, the point, it is very positive. And that also makes Mr. Berger so unique. I remind you that Moshe Tzvi went through the Shoah. Not in Auschwitz, but in the camps. Tough enough to went through the war. For someone who went through this, it's so unique to see that in his work you look at it. It's very bright, it's very lightful, it's very happy. Look at other artists who went through the Shoah, you will always see a small allusion, if it's not always said, a small allusion to this point of their life. Now, about Ana Bekoach, I would say that it's very deep, it's nearly Kabbalistic. It's a period, he painted this in a period of his life. He was learning, I think, a lot of Kabbalah. The first one is this one. And the only one on which it's written on its base, Ana Bekoach. What do we see here? We do see a large Yud. Around the large Yud are all the initials of the Ana Bekoach prayer. He worked only with the 7 colors of the rainbow, right? So to each line, he used another color of the rainbow, as there are 7 lines. On each line of this prayer, there are 6 words. It doesn't move. There are 6 words on each line. 6 by 7, 42. 42 words. So all the initials of these words are around this Yud, okay? It's all about the creation, by the way. I want to remind you that Ana Bekoach is a very, very old prayer. It is dated to over 2,000 years ago. It was written by a high priest, and it's very, very Kabbalistic. On the top of the Yud here, we have the crown, right? Keter in Kabbalah, Keter is crown in Hebrew, is the highest sphira, from which I would say that all the creation comes, or all, as far I can express myself like this, that the idea of the creation comes from. Yeah, we see like a light which is coming down into the Yud and is followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Yud, which are an allusion to the Sfirot. There are 10 Sfirot, right? On the base of the Sfirot, we have the word bara, and the reflection of it on the other side, he created. By the way, he created the word with the 10 Sfirot. In Kabbalah, it's explained there are 2 groups of Sfirot. The first 3 ones are called mothers, and the other 7 are the midot, the 7 sort of values. That's the one used for this painting, okay? So all the creation, the idea of the creation, it's like machshava in Kabbalah, which is very important. Machshava comes in a very deep point where there is no words yet. Words become and starts to come alive only once it's come to your mouth and you want to express it to you, to him, yeah? But before it stays in the in thought, machshava. So all the creation comes from the machshava of the Almighty, from the highest point of the spheres, Keter. And the Yud here, actually surrounding everything except the crown, is like the eye of the Almighty, which is looking at his creation here. He was waking up very early in the morning, going and pray, going to the mikveh, and started meditating on what was Ana Bekoach and what he could reach in there. But I would say what he told me about the Psalms, that the reason he called his book Visions of the Psalms that because he always saw the pictures before he started on it. And I can tell you, as someone who worked with art for years now, that it's very rare that an artist starts an artwork knowing exactly where he wanted to go, what point he wanted to reach, and what he wanted to express. Usually, an artist starts with a white painting and knows it started something, but you know, his idea is getting developed while he's working, when he's creating. But he never. He always told me, I saw the painting before I started to paint it, so I knew where exactly what was going to point, what was going to paint, and that is fantastic. Don't forget, taking maybe in consideration that after 150 paintings, based on the sounds that he did in a deep way, with each one with his own message, his own significance, he has a sort of experience. You understand? His head is already a part of his thinking about art. What he thinks about art is there. Is just the continuation of the idea. Then he gets deeper to a deeper place, to a deeper point, on Nabokov, the Psalms, which he was calling the Psalms connection to the Almighty. But after 150 paintings painted on the Psalms, we can think that finally he really got connected to him. And once connected to him, he reached a point that he was able to make this series of 42 paintings based on the Nabokov. A lot of difference between the start of the Psalms and the end of the Psalms, 15 years, because of his character, because he's a straight man. He's a mainstream man. When he takes something, he goes for it, and goes for it into the end. And he was like this, and I think that's what kept him alive so long. He was independent, never wanted any help. And yes, because of his character, he was like this. And he believed until the last second what he did for the last 25 years.
Welcome back. Community rabbi and teacher Rabbi Daniel Kohn has been highly successful as a facilitator of profound spiritual change in people who take his seminars and workshops around Israel and in South Africa. Today we start a new series on how prayer can lead to personal and spiritual growth.
Prayer in Hebrew is actually called Avodah Shebalev, the work of the heart. And the power of prayer is in that it's really very much the definition of what it means to be a human being. And I think if we look at ourselves as unique among all of the creatures, probably the most outstanding feature that is ours is that we hope, that we are able to lift ourselves out of the current local circumstances that we're living in and hope and dream and stand outside of ourselves and see what could be different, how things could change and grow, to be able to imagine. So that power is embedded in the nature of what it means to be a human being. It gives us the power to choose. It gives us the power to will. It gives us the power to direct, to evolve, all consciously. So these are the primary features that make us into human beings, and they are the primary features of prayer. So the way the Torah says it is that at the very beginning of creation, there's a creation which is the story that people are familiar with, which is that there were 6 days. God made this, God made that, God put everything into order, everything was in place, and then came the day of rest. And that's the end of the story as most people are familiar with it. But the truth is that the Torah then actually seems to completely veer away from that story and give an entirely different view of creation. And that begins in the second chapter of Bereshit, the second chapter of Genesis, when we begin to hear that these are the unfoldings, this is the evolving of heaven and earth, that goes on and says that there was nothing that was able to grow. And there was nothing growing because there was no rain. And there was no rain because there was no man to work the earth. And so God made a mist come over the planet and created man out of the dust of the earth. Earth called Adama and man called Adam, his name reflecting him being brought out of the earth. And the rabbis fill in what's missing here. What does it mean there was a man missing to work the ground? And what could that mean? And why would working the ground bring rain? If the problem is that there isn't rain, so then he should start seeding clouds. I mean, he shouldn't start like plowing the earth. So they have an amazing interpretation of that. They say, well, you know, prayer is called avodah. As I said before, it's the work of the heart. And here is the first time that we're told about man as having an avodah. The avodah that he has is to work the earth. All right, so how does that get to rain? So the rabbis say, well, it gets to rain because his work for the earth reflects his care for creation. And if he's caring for creation, then that means he must be doing something that no other creature could do. And that is to hope, to stand outside of his circumstance, and to desire something more. That's the original work. Now, the incredible thing about this story is that what we're being told is that the planet cannot function unless there is a human consciousness that is hoping, yearning, and choosing for things to improve. That creation is static, and not only static, does not function unless there is that element of creation. That element of creation is prayer. Now, one of the beautiful things about this is that basically what we're being told is that Adam taken from Adama, man taken from earth, who's working the earth, is actually profoundly working himself. And in a very real way, man we could describe as the consciousness of the earth. So this very beautiful description of the original creation stands in a sense, and the rabbis point this out, in distinction to the first story. In the first story, everything's in place. And in a sense, you say, well, there's a place for man too. He's created on the sixth day. But in that first story, everything's got a place which God defined and set. It's a very static story. And really, there's no place for hope, yearning, change, dynamism, evolution, possibilities. In the second story, we really have a story of, yeah, it's mamish, the real thing. You know, it's like a world in which there's a relationship, in which there's a creature that cares, expresses yearning, hope, possibilities. Yeah, and that really defines prayer.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a message on Facebook at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Aaron Halevi, and the rest of the Simcha team, have a great week ahead.